This is Master the Moment. I'm Ray Roman. I'm so happy you joined me. Over the next few hours, I'm gonna be teaching you everything there is to know about wedding filmmaking. I've been wanting to do a course like this for so long. A course that would walk you through step by step everything that I do at a wedding. No matter what the situation is, no matter how many obstacles there are, a course that'll walk you through everything that I do to overcome these challenges at weddings so you can still pull through and meet all of your client expectations. Growing up as a kid in Miami, my dream was always to join the police force, and that's exactly what I did. I was a detective, part of the SWAT team, and it seemed like that was going to be my career. So I'm sitting there in the detective bureau, and I come up with this idea that I want to transfer all my kids' home videos to DVD. So I run out to Best Buy that day, and I buy this little gadget that can do the trick. It can transfer the home videos to DVD. And this thing came with an introductory piece of software. It was like a consumer editing program. And I said, okay, so I brought it home, I popped it in the computer, I loaded up some of that footage, and literally within 30 minutes, I'm like the Steven Spielberg of my household. So I just became obsessed with the editing part, really. I was just filming my kids at that time, but the editing stuff I fell in love. I remember going to work and just asking anybody and everybody for some footage, photos, home videos, anything that could get me just so I could edit this stuff into little mini movies. So I did that for about 2-3 months. Everybody thought I was nuts, but they loved the end product. And I really got into just making these things as kind of like emotionally driven as I can, you know, with the music and the images. And one day I said, you know what? This camera that I got filming my kids, it's about 8 years old. We need a new camera. I moonlight a little bit. I save up for this camera. I buy it. Unbeknownst to me, I purchased this camera. It was a Sony VX2100. And it happened to be one of the most popular video cameras amongst wedding video guys. So I got this camera, I'm shooting my kids, the footage looks great. And then one day this guy comes into the detective bureau and he says, he goes, hey man, I got a wedding coming up in January and you got this big fancy camera. You think you can film it? And I looked at him, I said, hell yeah, I can film your wedding. I was basically signed on to this guy's wedding. I knew nothing about wedding filmmaking. So I was petrified. But I said, you know what? I don't want to shoot this wedding by myself. I need a second shooter. So I go up to my crime scene guy, I'm full-time detective. And I said, hey, you film these crime scenes, right? And he says, yeah, I film the crime scenes. And I said, you think you can shoot a wedding with me? And he's like, hell yeah, I can shoot a wedding with you. So now you got a detective and a crime scene guy going out to shoot this wedding. We don't know what the hell we're doing. And we go out to this wedding, we shoot the wedding, and the footage actually wasn't that bad. It was an outdoor wedding, there was plenty of light, and I was smart enough just to keep the camera on a tripod. So the footage was pretty steady for the most part. But when I got back, I was looking at the footage and I needed to deliver a wedding video. I just didn't know how. I didn't know how to edit a wedding video. So I said, you know what, let me go online. I wanna see how the pros do it. And I was kind of amazed because most of the websites I was going to, I was seeing the work and I just felt that I could do work that was better than what I was seeing online by the pro guys. I just knew nothing about the craft, obviously. But I said at the time, I said, you know what, if I could just learn this craft, I think I can outdo these guys and maybe earn some big bucks because these guys were earning, you know, $500, $700. Compared to what I was earning as a cop, that was like really big money. So we delivered this wedding video and I thought it was great. It was emotionally driven. They loved it. And I thought I did a great job at the time based on what I had and the skill that I had and things like that. So I literally just went back to police work and I never thought of weddings again until one day, one of the guys at work, he comes up to me and he says, he goes, hey, you know all that fancy stuff you're buying? The computer and the camera and all this? And I said, yeah. He goes, you know, if you form a corporation, you can write all that stuff off on your taxes. So I was like, really? And he said, yeah. So I said, all right. So he started walking me through the whole process of incorporating. And you know, once I had the company, I just felt an itch. So I started looking into the weddings now. Now that I had this company, I really started looking into the weddings. And I remember I called a few people in town who were not willing to talk to me once they figured out that I was looking to do the same thing they were doing. And there was really like, there was no networking at the time. There was no communication amongst wedding videographers, which didn't help me much because I was really looking to learn. And I remember I found this one guy, and to put him at ease, I said, look, I'm a full-time detective. I don't really have interest in doing this full-time, but I do want to learn the craft. I'll go out and assist you, and I'll do it for free. So when I said free, that definitely piqued his interest. And the one thing I really liked about this guy was that he was very fundamentally sound. He wasn't the most creative person in the world, but he was definitely fundamentally sound. And I believe that was kind of like the building blocks that I needed to really get this thing going in the right direction. So I ended up on my first event with this guy that I'd found online. And I remember when he rolled in, I looked at his kit and I almost had a heart attack. I mean, it was actual professional video production gear. I did not own any of this stuff, and I could not afford to own any of this stuff. It was the real deal. And I mean, the stuff that I had in my kit, he looked at it and he basically laughed, because I had, a $20 3-watt light from a drugstore. I had a $30 just wired mic that ran from my camera all the way up to the groom. So I had a lot to learn. So I did about 8 or 9 events with this guy, and I felt really comfortable. At the end of 8 or 9 events, I really felt comfortable. I felt as though, you know what? I have the confidence to go out there and shoot an event myself. And by about that time, I mean, I was doing moonlighting, I was working my full-time job, and I slowly started to buy gear. And over time, I basically developed his same kit that he would bring to all these weddings. It wasn't the best kit in terms of being unobtrusive, because the lighting that he used was not the greatest, say for like a high-end, very intimate event. I would think like lower budget weddings, maybe you can get away with something like that. I wouldn't advise you to today. There's many other options out there. But I remember I showed up at my first high-end event, and it was a very low-lit, intimate affair, and I showed up with this Lowell Pro 250-watt light. And I get to the reception, it's very low-lit, and based on the training that I had, the little training that I had, I said, you know what, I gotta pop up a light. So I threw up one of these 250-watt lights, and I gotta tell you, this place transformed from like a low-lit, very expensive, intimate affair to Sam's Club now, where everything was just lit up like a warehouse. And I thought nothing of it. I thought it was normal, because this guy did the same thing. And I remember a catering manager running up to me, and she says, "Whose light is that?" And very proudly I said, "Oh, that's my light." And she said, "Turn that crap off." And I almost had a heart attack, because I'm thinking, without my light, what do I do? Because, these cameras obviously weren't DSLRs. We didn't have any cameras that actually performed well in low light. And she screamed at me. And I gotta tell you, she gave me an earful. But when I left that event, I had to go on a search for a smaller light, a light that had a lot of throw, because I was gonna need that light. But I needed a light that only lit what I needed lit and not the rest of the room. I wanted to be able to go to these high-end events and not be that intrusive videographer, because that was my goal, was to kind of reach the top. And I didn't want to start getting thrown out of these high-end venues, right? Like that would defeat the purpose. So my search was just to find smaller lights. But I wasn't full-time yet. I still had to make a decision. Was I going to be doing the police stuff full-time, or was I going to be doing wedding filmmaking full-time? So my schedule was extremely packed. So now I have to make a decision, because the backlog on the wedding side is adding up, the backlog at work in the detective bureau, that's adding up, and I just honestly didn't have time to do both. So now I had to make a decision. Do I leave my childhood dream job, police work, or do I leave this newfound passion, wedding videography? But I couldn't do both at the same time, so I had to make the decision to leave one or the other, and I chose to leave police work. And that was a really difficult decision for me, because I really loved that job, but I felt in my heart that I loved doing the wedding video stuff even more. I was still a little nervous about leaving a full-time job with full-time benefits, dental, medical, all this stuff, because I have a family, and I can't be irresponsible with my newfound passion, which was the wedding video stuff. I still have bills to pay. And so I said, you know what? Let me stay on the reserves. Just for peace of mind, I'll stay on the reserves so the benefits will stay there and things like that. And I did. The problem is I never came in for reserve duty. So I remember after a couple months, my lieutenant called me at home, and he goes, "Look, you don't have to do anything when you come in, but you at least got to show your face, at least like once or twice a month." So I said, all right, let me just go in there. So I remember I picked a Sunday, And I said, you know what, Sunday, there's nothing gonna be going on. It'll be easy schmeezy. I'll go on a ride along and it'll be done and I'll fulfill my obligation on the reserves. I remember I went in and the first 2 calls was like a fight with knives, and the second call was a shooting. And after that, I went immediately to the station. I typed up my official resignation letter and I sent it in, and that was pretty much it. So I started doing this full time, and on my path to becoming a wedding filmmaker, I discovered that there was some hangups along the way. One of them being like back, 10 years ago when I started, video wasn't the most important thing at a wedding. It was really photography. And the norm was kind of playing second fiddle to a photographer and really shooting over the photographer's shoulder. That's where you were kind of allowed to be. And I didn't think that was right. I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to kind of explore my own creativity and come up with my own shots. So I would tell you that's probably one of the biggest struggles I had early on, was the struggle between photo and video. I was getting to these events and I'm trying to break this old traditional norm. And I thought, you know what? We should be able to both show up. You get creative with your own shots. I'll get creative with my shots. We'll split the time. We'll come up with great content for the couple. And I got to tell you, they didn't want to hear about that too much. If I'm being honest, it took a few years. And I can tell you, in my own backyard in South Florida, I honestly believe that, I'm one of the reasons why photographers started to accept this new idea that wedding videographers were now like these wedding filmmakers. And they were actually being creative on their own. They didn't have to sit there and copy photographer shots. And you know what the best thing about this was? I felt it was always better to have 2 minds there, photo and video, thinking up great shots. And at the end, we both left with more content than if one person was just the sole person coming up with all these ideas and all these shots. So over time, I think this really built a path to where we are today, where you have these wedding filmmakers showing up to these weddings and photographers are okay with it. Like they know, okay, we're gonna have these creative minds coming in. They're gonna come up with their shots. We're gonna come up with our shots. We're gonna work together. Hopefully, we'll be able to work together and we're gonna provide the clients an excellent product. I still feel like there's videographers out there that are more traditional and they just wanna go to a wedding and just document the wedding as it happened. And then there's filmmakers, people that want to tell stories. I want to be a storyteller. I wanted to come up with shots that were outside the norm, not just basic like stale potatoes, very predictable shots. I wanted the truffle fries. I wanted shots that I had to really challenge myself creatively to come up with these shots that were going to be visually stunning in these films that I was producing. And I really think that's what you got to do. You have to be different. You got to force yourself to be different. It's a lot more work, right? You're thinking outside the box, you're visualizing, you're creating scenes. It's a lot more challenging than just going out and documenting a wedding. But I think you have to do that if you want to reach that next level. You have to do something outside the norm. You can't just stay stuck doing the same thing as 99% of the wedding videographers out there, which is just go out, shoot with your DSLR, have a pretty picture, with some gimbal shots, maybe a drone shot. That's just not gonna work. It's not gonna work in the high-end arena. You have to be doing something a little bit more than that, or you're just gonna be just like everybody else, and really it's gonna boil down to who's got the best price. And you never wanna be in the conversation of best price. You wanna be in the conversation of best product. But what if I told you, you could go from good sound in your production to great sound in your production, or go from good lighting to great lighting in your productions? You think that would be worth the investment? Because I know most videographers out there, they're not gonna invest. They're gonna go cheap. They're gonna get gear that's just good enough. But for me, it's never good enough. I'm always trying to reach the top with everything that I do. So if you're getting into wedding filmmaking, you're essentially gonna be the producer, the director of photography, I want to be the creative shooter at my events, but I need a solid second shooter. On my team, Jessica is my solid shooter. Because a lot of times I'm going out looking for these creative shots, but the reality is they're very risky. And I could miss a shot trying to be creative. And if I don't have that solid second shooter, I may miss a very important shot, such as the bride coming down the aisle. On my team, I rely on Jessica to be my tight angle. This actually frees me up to be more creative and maybe look for that shot that's going to be a lot more visually interesting than just that solid lockdown shot. What about audio? How important is audio to your events? Or lighting? I can't do everything, and Jessica certainly can't do everything. So what do? We split the tasks. So when we're showing up to events, I'm handling all the lighting, I'm setting up the cameras. Meanwhile, Jessica's setting up all the audio for ceremony and reception. This is vital, and this is why teamwork is so important. So as these events started to get bigger and more elaborate, I felt as though I needed more help because these events, they were happening very quick, and I saw moments that were just slipping away because I was stuck carrying gear around, and I couldn't record those moments because I needed to get from one spot to the next with all the gear. So I brought on an assistant who now makes me quicker and more efficient. Now I don't miss those moments. And your team members can't just be anybody. They have to be people that care about your product. You have to hold them accountable. Your second shooter, for instance, they're responsible for half your footage. Think about that for a second. I mean, you could go out and shoot the wedding of your life, but if your second shooter goes out and maybe they're feeling lazy that day and they're just not putting the same amount of effort into their shots, your production is going to suffer. What I generally do is the day after an event, 2 days after an event, I'm actually reviewing all the footage from the wedding. I'm looking at my footage, I'm looking at Jessica's footage, I'm looking at Anthony's footage. I'm really looking for the small little details, such as maybe better composition, maybe better lighting, maybe better audio, maybe even better teamwork amongst ourselves, things like that. But there's gotta be something that you can improve upon. I wanna keep growing, I wanna keep evolving. I want these productions to remain next level over time. And the only way you can do that is if you keep growing, you keep learning, you keep improving. If you're not doing all those things, you're just not gonna be able to reach the top and stay there for any length of time. There's a lot of different people that you're gonna have to deal with. You're gonna have to deal with wedding planners, sound people, lighting people. Sometimes you're dealing with a makeup artist, right? Because you're trying to find the best light and get the makeup artist to move over to the best light. So now you gotta have the command presence enough to kind of ask for what you need. And now you gotta kind of negotiate a little bit. Even with the photographer, you gotta negotiate, right? Because we're all looking for the best case scenario for our particular work. What about the DJ? Now you gotta deal with the DJ because you need sound. You're gonna have to negotiate with the DJ. We're gonna talk about a splitter system that I like to introduce for the ceremony and the reception. And trust me, you're gonna need to negotiate with the DJ for this. So there's a lot of different hats that you're gonna have to wear. And then you have your director's hat, right? Now you're dealing with a wedding planner, you're looking at the timeline, you're making sure there's actually enough time on the timeline for your prep session, hopefully a first look, maybe some candidates. But what happens if the bride runs late? That happens all the time. It's happened at my events where they had a first look scheduled, candidates scheduled, and we're at this beautiful venue, and now first look and candidates is canceled. And now all your creative content, a lot of your creative content for the film is washed away. But guess what? There's still a wedding going on. There's still other things that are happening, other things that are in place that you can film, like details. There's tons of florals, hopefully. There's a beautiful venue, maybe. And you just start exploiting that stuff. You have to make up for it. You can't give up. I remember a wedding I had in Italy. I was there 3 days. It was at an amazing venue. It was on the water. The couple was amazing, but I ended up with like 7 minutes with this couple. And I had to split that 7 minutes with the photographer. So essentially, I had about 3 minutes to get what I needed from this couple. And I tell you, that whole wedding, all those 3 days, I just literally focused on other things that can add additional impact to the film. This is what we do at this level. We push through and we don't give up. We show up to these events looking the part. We look like professionals. When you walk through that door, you are your brand. I always tell people, if you want to be high-end, you have to look high-end. You have to think at a high level. You have to push through the difficult situations, assemble a great team. There's so many more things I want to show you in this course, so let's go.